Acceleration in its most perfect, devastating form. 0 to 70 miles per hour in just 3 seconds. She is evolution's ultimate pursuit predator, but this velocity comes with a lethal biological tax. At these speeds, a single misstep is fatal. A calculated trip brings the chase to a violent halt. The sprint is over, but the true battle for survival has only just begun. She is suffocating her prey, while simultaneously fighting off her own asphyxiation. Her heart rate has spiked to over 250 beats per minute. Her muscles are flooded with lactic acid. She has generated a massive oxygen debt, and the surrounding environment offers no relief. It is the peak of the dry season in the Maasai Mara. The ambient temperature hovers near 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This ecosystem is a theater of extreme visibility. There is nowhere to hide. The core temperature of her brain has reached dangerous levels. If she does not rest, she risks severe hyperthermia. She cannot eat yet. Her physiology simply will not allow it. She must first cool her boiling blood. The Maasai Mara is in a state of starvation. Millions of herbivores march in search of vanishing water. Moisture is a memory here. The flora and the fauna are locked in a shared endurance test. Every minute spent recovering is a minute the savanna uses to broadcast her success to the rest of the ecosystem. The sky is the first to know. Scavengers read the landscape from above, and their circling is a glaring signal. Hearing is her secondary defense. In the tall grass, sound travels faster than sight. The ultimate evolutionary trade-off is this: you can have speed, or you can have strength. You cannot have both. The cheetah's light, aerodynamic frame makes her the fastest land mammal, but a lightweight fighter on the ground. A spotted hyena outweighs her by 30 pounds and possesses a bite force capable of crushing elephant bone. The solitary feline is now faced with a brutal calculus: defend the meal she desperately needs, or risk a crippling injury. Scavengers in the dry season do not ask, they take. Opportunism is the truest law of survival here. She attempts a display of dominance, a bluff to buy time, but her exhausted state betrays her. Hyenas rarely hunt alone. The arrival of a second confirms the cheetah's worst fears. She is outnumbered. For a sprinter, any injury to a leg is a death sentence. There are no veterinarians in the wild. The surrender is absolute. The prize of her 70-mile-per-hour sprint is stolen in seconds. She does not fight. Evolution has hardwired her to prioritize tomorrow's survival over today's meal. It is a devastating loss of energy. The physical toll of the hunt yields 0 caloric return. The starvation clock resets, but the day is long, and the sun is merciless. Every living thing in the Mara must manage its energy reserves down to the microscopic level. She will need to rest until the shadows lengthen. Only then can the cycle of speed and starvation begin again. Her camouflage is designed to break up her outline in the dappled light of the tall grass, rendering her nearly invisible. But the dry season has stripped the environment bare. Finding cover is now as difficult as finding prey. This meager canopy offers a fraction of relief from the solar radiation pounding the earth. Here, she must wait out the deadliest part of the day, a captive to the climate. For the next few hours, the entire ecosystem calls a truce. The heat is the only apex predator that matters. Water is the driving force of this landscape, and its absence dictates every movement, every strategy. Nothing is wasted. What remains is fought over, recycled, and utilized by the smallest architects of the plains. She rests, but her muscles ache from the lactic acid buildup. The memory of the lost meal lingers in her empty stomach. The earth continues its rotation. The oppressive grip of midday slowly begins to fracture. As the shadows stretch, the temperature drops just enough to signal a change in the shift. The window of opportunity is incredibly narrow. She must hunt again before darkness falls. The herbivores know the rhythm of the savanna. The dropping temperature is an alarm bell. She must shake off the fatigue. The machinery of speed requires precision calibration. Her stomach is hollow. The stakes for this next pursuit are exponentially higher. She must navigate a landscape that is slowly coming alive with rival predators waking from their slumber. She is a master of spatial awareness, plotting a course through hostile territory. The calculus of starvation demands absolute perfection. There will be no room for scavengers next time. The environment is shifting into its most beautiful and deadly phase. The fastest animal on Earth now relies entirely on her ability to move with absolute stillness. The macro theater of the Mara prepares for the golden hour, and a desperate predator prepares for her final chance. The cheetah's solitary struggle is but a single thread in the vast, unraveling tapestry of the dry season. The Mara River is the beating heart of this ecosystem, and right now, it is experiencing cardiac arrest. As the water evaporates, territorial boundaries collapse. Proximity breeds immense stress and inevitable violence. To survive the exposure, their skin secretes a natural, blood-colored sunscreen and antibiotic. The cold-blooded residents employ a different strategy. Gaping allows the crocodile to release excess body heat into the breeze. They enter a state of estivation, lowering their heart rate to a few beats per minute, waiting for the herds to cross. Out on the plains, the Great Migration is a desperate, endless march, driven by the singular scent of moisture. Over 1.5 million wildebeest are locked in a relentless pursuit of the rains. They follow ancient, invisible highways, mapped over millennia, seeking grasses rich in phosphorus and calcium. But the true architects of this ecosystem are the elephants. They do not just follow the water, they remember it. Decades of accumulated geographical knowledge allow the matriarch to locate subterranean water tables. She excavates a lifeline. Her trunk can draw up to 2 gallons of water at a time. This knowledge is not genetic, it is taught. The survival of the herd depends entirely on the memory of its oldest members. An entire symbiotic hierarchy forms around these temporary wells. The smaller herbivores wait their turn. Without the brute strength of the pachyderms to breach the dry earth, many of these species would perish. The flora, too, has evolved extreme countermeasures. The baobab stores thousands of gallons of water in its swollen trunk. It serves as a living reservoir and a vertical ecosystem for countless insects and avian species. The giraffe bypasses the depleted ground cover, its anatomy perfectly adapted to exploit a different food source entirely. Its 18-inch tongue is fortified with thick papillae, impervious to the acacia's lethal defenses. But the tree fights back. It houses symbiotic ant colonies that viciously defend their host in exchange for shelter. It is an endless arms race of biology. Every calorie consumed here requires an immense expenditure of effort. The dry season is nature's great filter. It mercilessly culls the weak, the old, and the inexperienced. Death in the Mara is merely a transfer of energy. Even bone is eventually consumed and returned to the soil. Nomads like the ostrich extract what little moisture they need entirely from the roots and seeds they consume. They can survive for days without a single drop of freestanding water. But as the afternoon wanes, the dynamic of the ecosystem undergoes a fundamental shift. The apex predators, completely inactive during the boiling heat of the day, are beginning to awaken. The lions are the undisputed monarchs of this realm. They command the shade, and soon, they will command the night. Their heavy, muscular builds make them prone to overheating, restricting their hunting almost entirely to the darkness. The dropping temperature is the catalyst. The entire food web must now reorient itself for the nocturnal shift. The herbivores pull back from the thickets. Safety now lies in the open plains, where sightlines are clear. Every shadow becomes a potential ambush point. The psychological stress on the prey species is immense. These geological formations serve as vital vantage points and fortresses in the flat expanse of the Mara. The leopard, the master of ambush, surveys its domain. It is an opportunist that thrives on the confusion of dusk. With the lions stirring in the grass and leopards watching from above, the savanna becomes a three-dimensional minefield. Millions of avian species seek secure roosts, abandoning the sky before the darkness brings aerial predators. There is safety in overwhelming numbers. A predatory response is paralyzed by the sheer density of the flock. The scavengers, too, are mobilizing. The hyena clan prepares to patrol the boundaries of their vast territory. Their communication is highly sophisticated. Tonight, they will function as a highly organized, lethal syndicate. Even the smallest inhabitants know the rule of the Mara. When the sun drops, you must secure shelter or become prey. The landscape transforms into an ocean of camouflage, favoring those who hunt by stealth and strength. A pride of lionesses on the move is the most formidable force in the African ecosystem. Over 300 pounds of muscle, moving with absolute acoustic invisibility. The African sunset is beautiful, but it marks the beginning of the most violent hours of the day. The auditory landscape is rewritten. Low-frequency roars travel for miles, defining the borders of life and death. Carnivores of all scales operate under the cover of fading light. The visual field is collapsing. For animals that rely on sight, the world shrinks to a few terrified yards. Trapped in this transitional theater is a diurnal specialist, dangerously out of her element. Her biology is designed to hunt in the blazing sun, outrunning prey on the open flats where she can see her path. But starvation leaves her no choice. As the macro theater yields to the night shift, she must navigate a world ruled by monsters. Under the cloak of night, her greatest asset, blinding speed, is completely neutralized. It has been 48 hours since her last meal. The biological calculus of starvation is now underway. Mammalian metabolism is a ruthless engine. When external fuel is denied, the body begins to consume itself. She has burned through her glycogen reserves. Her liver is now desperately converting internal fat stores into usable energy. But the ultimate danger is muscle catabolism. If she loses muscle mass, she loses the fast twitch fibers required for a 70-mile-per-hour sprint. A slow cheetah is a dead cheetah. The window for a successful hunt is closing with every passing hour. Navigating the nocturnal Maasai Mara requires a hyper-detailed, three-dimensional mental map of the predator hierarchy. The apex predators dictate the geography of the night. Their resting places are biological exclusion zones. Although they are asleep, the lions project an invisible perimeter of scent and sound that the cheetah must actively decode. An olfactory border wall. She can smell their density, their age, and their absolute dominance. The margin for error is zero. A chance encounter in the dark would result in an execution, not a fight. Survival relies on a constant, exhaustive processing of data. Every sound is categorized: prey, predator, or ambient noise. Even the canopy is hostile. The leopard patrols the vertical space, a silent assassin operating in the mid-tier of the hierarchy. Solitary cats share the same biome, but their evolutionary niches demand extreme avoidance of one another. The night shift is chaotic and unpredictable. The carefully constructed mental map is constantly being disrupted. A potential meal walks right past her. The caloric reward is massive, but the physics are impossible. A zebra possesses bone-shattering kicks. A lightweight sprinter cannot afford to engage heavy artillery. True survival intelligence is knowing exactly what you are biologically incapable of killing. The ground forces are sweeping the sector. Scavengers rely on their exceptional olfactory grid to map the movements of every animal in the plain. A footprint is a chemical biography. It broadcasts weight, direction, and the undeniable scent of exhaustion. The scavenger senses vulnerability. A starving feline is a target of opportunity. She has found a temporary fortress, a labyrinth of thorns that deters larger, heavier predators. She relies on the hostile flora of the dry season to act as a barrier against the night's relentless patrols. The desert climate is a study in extremes. The boiling forge of the day has transformed into a freezing, hypoxic environment. Without the insulating layer of body fat, the cold drains her remaining energy reserves at a terrifying rate. Every calorie shivering consumes is a calorie she will desperately need when the sun rises. The entire ecosystem is suspended in a brutal state of energy conservation. Under the immense scale of the galaxy, the daily struggle for survival feels incredibly small, yet profoundly absolute. Sleep is a luxury the starving cannot afford. She remains in a state of hyper-vigilant rest. The mathematics of survival dictate that she must endure the freezing dark and prepare her biology for a single, defining explosion of speed. The rotation of the Earth offers a fragile promise. The longest night is finally fracturing. The daytime scavengers awaken, knowing that the morning light often reveals the tragedies of the night. Her joints are stiff from the cold. The lactic acid from yesterday's failed hunt still lingers deep in her muscle tissue. The machine must be recalibrated. The kinetic chain of bones, tendons, and fast-twitch fibers must be aligned for violence. The visual advantage shifts back to the diurnal predators. The night shift is over, and the nocturnal monsters are retreating to the shadows. As light reclaims the Maasai Mara, the relentless cycle of predation resumes across every level of the food web. The herbivores take advantage of the moisture. Dew provides a vital, fleeting source of hydration before the sun evaporates it. Elevation is strategy. From this vantage point, she maps the distribution of prey against the cover of the terrain. Her visual acuity is staggering. She can identify a vulnerable target from over 2 miles away, analyzing its limp, age, or isolation. A solitary target. The mathematics of the stalk begin. She calculates distance, cover, and the inevitable angle of pursuit. The margin for failure is gone. If she exhausts herself again without a kill, she will cross the physiological point of no return. She is no longer walking, she is flowing. Every micro movement is designed to absorb kinetic energy and eliminate acoustic output. A 70-mile-per-hour sprint is useless if the prey detects the stalk. The true mastery of the cheetah lies in her patience. The herbivore is hardwired for paranoia. A sudden shift in the wind, a shadow, or a broken stalk can trigger a stampede. When detected, her only defense is absolute, statuesque immobility. She becomes a fixture of the landscape. The camouflage holds. The disruptive pattern of her coat tricks the prey's rudimentary depth perception. She must close the distance to within 30 yards. Any further, and the prey will outlast her aerobic capacity. The world narrows. The periphery fades. There is only the target, the distance, and the hollow ache in her stomach. She reaches the edge of cover. The tactical phase of the hunt is over. The ballistic phase is about to begin. The calculus is complete. The biological engine is primed. It is time to fly. Acceleration is instantaneous. The solitary predator transforms from a static ambush hunter into a ballistic missile. Her spine is a biological marvel. It acts as a coiled spring, storing and releasing massive amounts of kinetic energy with every single stride. The impala's primary defense is unpredictability. It utilizes explosive, erratic bounds to break the predator's visual lock. Traction is the difference between a kill and a catastrophic injury. Her specialized claws grip the earth with brutal efficiency. The pursuit is a masterclass in high-speed geometry. The predator does not chase, she intercepts. Her long, heavy tail functions as a high-speed rudder, preventing her from rolling over during acute 50-mile-per-hour turns. The aerobic window is closing. She has perhaps 10 seconds left before oxygen deprivation forces her to abort. A surgical strike to the kinetic chain. The delicate balance of the fleeing herbivore is instantly destroyed. The impact is brutal, but the predator cannot afford a moment of hesitation. The bite is precise and absolute. It is designed to crush the trachea, severing the oxygen supply in a matter of seconds. She must maintain the lock while absorbing the violent, reflexive kicks of her dying prey. The execution is successful, but the biological tax has been levied once again. Her core temperature is soaring. She has secured a lifeline. In the vast, unforgiving theater of the Maasai Mara, this is the ultimate triumph. She is trapped in the familiar paradox of her species. She possesses the prize, but lacks the energy to consume it. The memory of yesterday's loss is a driving biological imperative. She cannot rest in the open. It is an agonizing expenditure of her remaining strength. She must move the kill into cover before the sky betrays her location. An impala is nearly her equal in weight. For a lightweight sprinter, it is equivalent to dragging a boulder. Under the canopy, she is shielded from the thermals. The avian scavengers will not spot the kill from above. She does not chew. Her specialized teeth shear meat from bone, allowing her to consume massive amounts of calories in minutes. The feast is steeped in paranoia. She eats with the frantic urgency of a creature that knows it is constantly hunted. The scent of fresh blood is a siren song that permeates the soil, awakening the micro-scavengers of the dry season. The grace period of the morning is over. The solar furnace of the Maasai Mara is firing up. In a single sitting, she can consume up to 20 pounds of meat, replenishing the massive caloric deficit of the past 2 days. But the olfactory beacon of the kill cannot be contained. The grim reapers of the savannah have arrived. Vultures possess an extraordinary sense of smell. They follow the scent corridor directly to the hidden kill site. The birds are not a physical threat, but they are nature's loudest alarm bell. Where the vultures gather, the jackals and hyenas are guaranteed to follow. The countdown has accelerated. She knows when to cut her losses. She has secured the fuel she needs to survive. Defending the leftovers is a fool's errand. She leaves the rest to the ecosystem. In the Mara, a successful hunt feeds far more than just the hunter. The biological transaction is complete. Life has been taken, energy has been transferred, and the balance is temporarily restored. Digestion requires massive amounts of energy and water. Her next imperative is hydration, an incredibly dangerous endeavor in the dry season. Water sources shrink to mere puddles, becoming highly concentrated zones of extreme tension. Predators and prey are forced into terrifying proximity. The rules of the savannah are violently tested at the water's edge. She approaches with extreme caution. Her full stomach slows her reflexes, making her uniquely vulnerable. The quality of the water is irrelevant. Hydration is the only metric that matters to her recovering physiology. The fragile truce of the watering hole is easily shattered by the arrival of the true heavyweights. The bull elephant demands absolute deference. His thirst dictates the movement of every other creature in the vicinity. Hierarchy is absolute. The fastest animal on Earth yields immediately to the largest. The cold-blooded inhabitants operate under a different set of rules, exploiting the chaos of the mammals. The cycle is complete. The morning rush of life and death settles back into the grueling endurance test of the midday sun. Her belly is full. Her hydration is secured. Now, she must sleep, allowing her exhausted cellular machinery to repair itself. In the brutal mathematics of the Mara, she has solved the equation of today. But tomorrow, the sun will rise, the stomach will empty, and the Great Migration will move further away. On the horizon, a distant promise forms. The dry season is formidable, but it is not eternal. The scent of ozone travels for miles, a magnetic pull that dictates the next move of 1 million herbivores. The rains will eventually return, transforming this hostile forge back into a sprawling, green Eden. Millions of dormant lives wait in silent suspension for the turning of the season. Until then, she will rely on the fragile edge of her speed, living hour by hour, sprint by sprint. This is the great crucible of the Maasai Mara, a world defined by breathtaking beauty and absolute, unforgiving reality, the ultimate theater of survival. The dry season does not end quietly. It is broken by atmospheric violence. A massive low-pressure system has collided with the superheated air of the savanna, triggering a meteorological shockwave. The herbivores align themselves with the wind, an instinctual brace for the deluge that will reset the ecosystem. In seconds, millions of tons of water are unleashed upon a landscape that has forgotten how to absorb it. The solar furnace is instantly extinguished, replaced by a blinding, chaotic flood. For the feline, the rain is an absolute disaster. Her fur lacks the heavy oils needed to repel water. The ground, once her greatest asset for high-speed pursuit, is now a frictionless trap. Her cleats are rendered useless. The parched earth cannot drink fast enough. The runoff creates lethal flash floods, severing escape routes. But for others, the deluge is resurrection. Amphibians emerge from their subterranean tombs, instantly initiating their breeding cycles. She is shivering violently. The sudden, drastic drop in ambient temperature strips the heat from her wet body. The heavyweights endure. Their mass provides thermal stability against the freezing downpour. For the pachyderms, this is not a crisis, it is relief. The agonizing trek for water is temporarily over. But for the apex predators, the storm is a tactical advantage. The rain is a cloak of invisibility. The heavy downpour neutralizes the alarm calls of birds and the sharp hearing of the herbivores. The lions hunt in the chaos. The cheetah knows the lions are moving. Remaining static in an area with zero visibility is a death sentence. The geography of the savanna is being violently redrawn in real time. She seeks elevation. The kopje offers drainage and, more importantly, a visual perimeter. But high ground is prime real estate. She must share this rocky island with lethal, cold-blooded neighbors. The auditory landscape is completely destroyed. She cannot hear the approach of scavengers or rivals. The olfactory web is washed clean. The invisible maps of scent and territory that dictate survival have been erased. Entire microcosms face existential threats. The rain dissolves the architectural marvels of the dry season. The primary shockwave passes, but the aftermath leaves a fundamentally altered ecosystem in its wake. Hypothermia is a silent killer on the African plains. The energy she gained from the impala is now being burned simply to stay warm. The storm has masked a massacre. The lions have capitalized on the chaos, and the auditory silence is now broken by their victory roars. She registers the location of the pride. The mental map must be redrawn from scratch. The silence of the drought is replaced by a biological explosion. The amphibian chorus signals the rebirth of the Mara. The semi-aquatic giants reclaim their territory. The stress of the shrinking pools is instantly alleviated. The cheetah is a prisoner of her sanctuary. She cannot hunt in the mud. Her anatomy forbids it. The scavengers are unbothered by the terrain. Their stamina and robust physiology allow them to patrol the flooded plains with ease. The scent of her wet fur has drifted down the rock face. The scavengers have detected the anomaly. She holds the high ground. It is the only tactical advantage she has left. The steep, slick rock face acts as an impenetrable fortress against the heavy, uncoordinated scavengers. Opportunists do not waste energy on impossible sieges. The pack moves on. The immediate threat evaporates, but the cold reality of the night remains. She must endure until the sun bakes the mud dry. The storm has passed, leaving a breathtaking, flooded reflection of the sky upon the earth. The aquatic predators expand their hunting grounds instantly, swimming over what was parched desert just hours ago. The rules of engagement have changed. The herbivores now face amphibious threats in the open savanna. For the ultimate sprinter, this flooded world is a nightmare. Her survival clock is tied directly to the evaporation rate. She is caught in the brutal transition between the seasons. The rains bring life to the Mara, but extreme hardship to the feline. The longest night slowly begins to break. The rotation of the earth brings the promise of thermal salvation. She has survived the deluge, her core temperature held, but the physical toll is written on her exhausted frame. The African dawn does not just bring light, it brings life-saving radiation. She becomes a solar panel. Every instinct commands her to absorb the heat and dry her heavy, waterlogged coat. The hunting grounds are paralyzed. Her prey is isolated, but reaching them requires crossing an impassable bog. Her tools must be cleaned. Mud, trapped between her toes, will ruin her traction when the ground finally solidifies. The solar forge goes to work. Millions of gallons of water begin to evaporate back into the atmosphere. The aerial predators have the immediate advantage, surveying the stranded populations from the sky. The warmth restores her agility. The lethargy of hypothermia is burned away by the equatorial sun. She cannot wait for perfection. The caloric clock is ticking once more, and she must adapt her strategy to this fractured landscape. The deluge has reset the board, but for the solitary cheetah, the relentless game of survival never truly pauses. The aftermath of the deluge presents a treacherous tactical puzzle. The earth is no longer a reliable foundation. It is a liability. She is forced to abandon the open plains and navigate via elevated ridges. The landscape dictates her path, funneling her movements. The flooded pans create localized feeding frenzies for avian predators, drawing attention and creating massive acoustic cover. She exploits the auditory chaos of the birds. Their feeding frenzy masks the acoustic footprint of her stalk. The herbivores are drawn to the peninsulas for the sudden bloom of moisture-rich shoots. But in doing so, they back themselves into a geographic corner. A 70-mile-per-hour sprint across this mire is physically impossible. Her cleats will not grip. The mud will snap her fragile ankles. The ultimate sprinter must completely abandon her signature weapon. She must rely entirely on extreme, close-quarters stealth. She enters the water. It is a desperate maneuver for a cat, driven by the absolute necessity of a silent approach. Her profile is minimized to an absolute fraction. From the gazelle's perspective, she is nothing more than a drifting log. The prey's survival instincts are razor-sharp. Even the absence of sound can trigger a defensive response. Immobility is her shield. The slightest ripple in the water would betray her position and end the hunt. The ecosystem inadvertently runs interference. The tension holds, and the camouflage remains intact. She has bridged the impassable gap. The tactical advantage has drastically shifted in her favor. The foundation is secure. The kinetic chain is re-established. At this proximity, a prolonged chase is unnecessary. This will be an execution of explosive, overwhelming force. The biological engine floods with adrenaline, overriding the exhaustion of the cold night. It is not a run, it is a singular, devastating strike. The element of surprise is absolute. The prey has zero time to calculate an escape trajectory. The collision weaponizes her momentum, transferring hundreds of pounds of kinetic energy directly into the herbivore. The lethal bite is instinctual and immediate. The struggle in the water is violently suppressed, a masterclass in adaptability. She has defied her own evolutionary limitations to secure survival. The herd escapes, sacrificing one to save the many. The brutal equilibrium of the savanna is maintained. She cannot rest. The scent of blood in the water is a beacon for crocodiles. She must secure the kill on dry land. She fortifies her position, surrounding herself with a visual barrier against the inevitable arrival of scavengers. The feast is frantic. Every mouthful is a deposit into her biological bank, a guarantee of life for another few days. As the morning advances, the Maasai Mara shakes off the chaos of the deluge, rapidly returning to its relentless, sun-baked rhythm. The macro theater quickly adapts. The floodwaters begin their slow retreat, leaving behind a hyper-fertilized soil. The Great Migration resumes its endless march, driven by the sudden explosion of life that follows the rain. The sky patrols resume their vigil. The cycle of life, death, and opportunistic scavenging continues unbroken. For the solitary feline, the immediate future is secured. The engine is fueled. The existential dread of starvation is temporarily silenced. Cleanliness is vital. She restores her camouflage, ensuring she remains a ghost in the golden grass when she next needs to vanish. Time is the only constant. The fierce urgency of the morning yields to the heavy, oppressive peace of the afternoon. She surrenders to the sleep she has earned, her biology repairing the micro-tears of her muscles, preparing for the inevitable hunts to come. She is a fragile masterpiece of evolution, a creature of extreme specialization, perpetually walking the razor's edge between velocity and starvation. Her existence is a testament to the brutal, beautiful perfection of the natural world. This is the macro theater, an interconnected web of life and death, where every drop of rain and every burst of speed matters. A world where survival is never guaranteed, but always fiercely fought for. This is the Maasai Mara,